the biggest facilitators of money laundering are the banks. Bitcoin was created in like the era of the 2008 subprime mortgage crisis, where basically banks screwed us over, financial institutions screwed us over, and the worst thing was taxpayers' money was used to pay for it. So it's almost like someone you, and then you have to pay them for you, you know? I do find DeFi relatively interesting, especially there's a lot of hype around it. It is interesting, but at the same time, I'm not one of those people that are always chasing like, oh, what's the next hype, right? To me, people always say, what's the killer app of blockchain? Payments is the killer app of blockchain. What Bitcoin was supposed to be, you know, like a form of uncensorable, free money that is owned by nobody. And I do think that, to me, privacy is super interesting right now, especially when we are entering into an age where cash is now seen as a bad thing, like physical cash, like in India, you know, physical cash has been limited. Malaysia, also physical cash is limited. In China, you know, certain whole tracts of people are just using WeChat Pay and not even accepting like physical renminbi. And people are like, oh yeah, it's so convenient, I don't have to have coins in my pocket, and which is fair enough. But what are they giving up? You are effectively giving up, you know, visibility into all your financial transactions. And a lot of people say, well, oh, I have nothing to hide, oh, I have nothing to you know, I'm spending it on noodles, what's there to hide, right? But the idea is that if governments have visibility of your money, if you do anything that they don't like, first of all, they can use that history against you. Let's say like, oh, you know, I can't get it up, you know, I go buy some Viagra, or, you know, I don't want people to know that. That could be embarrassing, right? Or even worse, I could just freeze that money to say, this money, I don't like Reuben, freeze that money, he's going to be excluded from the system. It gives government the
Write something in the thing, your enemies can use it against.
Yes, yeah. So basically, if you believe in a democracy that a government can change, but if we are giving every single data of our we already give out our identity to the government. They know what we own, and on top of that, now we have the financial activity and where we are staying. And even on top of that, like, take a look at what's happening to banks. Banks are reporting to each other, even cross borders, using the common reporting standard. You can no longer have the money outside as well. So what does that mean? That means the government doesn't like you, lock you down, you are now cut off from your finances. And I think a really good example of that is in Russia, where, you know, all these billionaires suddenly have to kowtow to Putin because he has the right to control. And how can you mount a resistance against a government that can basically cut you off from all your finances? It's impossible. And that's why like countries like Germany, right, even though it's like so advanced, or even Austria, right, they love cash because they see it. They have gone through like dictators like Hitler and all this sort of stuff, and they realize that money, physical money, needs to exist because, you know, you don't want a government that can control you know, how money is being spent. And we try to say like, yes, cash is great, but it requires you to be in person. We want to be like a cash version, but private. That means same qualities as cash, but now I can do it digitally. I don't have coins in my thing. I can do it cross-border. I don't even have to see you, and I can transfer this cash to you digitally without any intermediaries. And that's what we're kind of trying to solve here. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's a really good point. I think it's a narrative that a lot of people have been pushing, but let's be realistic. Like, you know, there are like 70-80% of money laundering actually happens through trade-based money laundering, which means that when people trade between different countries, they just mark up the value. So that accounts for 80% of the value. And if you take a look at who is doing actually the money laundering, let's look at Citibank, or look at HSBC, or look at Deutsche Bank. You know, like they had drug money, or like let's say for example HSBC with the Sinaloa drug cartel. They laundered like so much money, and yet all they got away basically scot-free. You know, all they did was they got a little slap on the hand, a small little fine. No one went to jail, and yet governments want to say like, oh, you know, we're going to screw privacy coins when we are It's just a drop in the ocean.
Like this kind of
Yeah, we love it. So, I think like cryptocurrency as a space, it's still a very nascent thing. And yes, of course, any sort of currencies like cash can be used for both good and bad purposes. But I think the idea is that more importantly, we need to have money that is uncensorable and is not answerable to anybody. I mean, you take a look at what happened with Bitcoin. Bitcoin was created in like the era of the 2008 subprime mortgage crisis, where basically banks screwed us over, financial institutions screwed us over, and the worst thing was taxpayers' money was used to pay for it. So it's almost like someone you and then you have to pay them for you, So, so Bitcoin was meant to be like above all of that, right? But now it's kind of different. Like, we have kind of moved away. You were supposed to be like digital cash, used to be for like uncensorable money. And now everyone's talking about store of value, Lambos, getting rich and stuff. Well, we're kind of forgetting the roots of what Bitcoin was supposed to be about. And Bitcoin is not uncensorable because it does not have privacy. Every single coin has a history. It's gone through this and this and this. A transfers to B. That's all recorded permanently. It's not just something that disappears out of thin air. It is recorded there for everyone to see. And although there may not be a name attached to it, with very simple blockchain analysis, all this data actually can just come together and say this person, and it's actually a real problem. I mean, can you imagine if I pay for, like I pay you 0.01 Bitcoin, but I have a wallet that had 100 Bitcoin. Immediately now I have 100 Bitcoin. What kind of financial system requires me to review how much I have when all you need to know is that you've gotten that money? And we're taking a look like North Korea, Venezuela, they're all amassing cryptocurrencies because they think that it's going to be uncensorable. But at the same time, you're going to see a wave of regulation that's already happening, that all these exchanges have massive blacklists of these coins are tainted, that coin is tainted. And I think it's only a matter of time that no matter what you do, because you're mixing using CoinJoin, you're mixing your funds with other people, that doesn't matter because the taint still travels through. And once, like let's say Venezuela, North Korea, or any sort of money starts being censored, then the uncensorability element of Bitcoin is gone. You need to make each coin basically indistinguishable from one another, which is basically the concept of fungibility. And the way Zcoin does this, unlike other coins which are more like cryptographic mixing, it is more about, let's say, taking a coin, destroying it, and then redeeming it at any time in the future. And that coin does not have any previous transaction history. It's like a brand new coin, like Virgin coin with no previous transaction history that is perfectly fungible. So I guess this is the way we see that we're building really, really important privacy building blocks. And we do this using technology that we develop ourselves, but of course it's open source and for everyone to take a look at and use even in their own protocols. Yeah. Anytime you want to escape tax, anytime you want to do of course drug money is a big thing, even terrorist funding, or just people doing all sorts of crime, right? Or even people who just want to move money. Let's say I'm from China, I want to move money out. I need a way to do this. Trade-based money laundering is the easiest way to do it. I just ship me some goods, let's say a bunch of bananas, and then I say this is the most premium bananas and I'm going to pay you 2 times more. That money moves. How are you going to track all this shit? Because you're not going to expect all this customs official and, is this banana premium quality? That's so, unrealistic. I mean, casinos are also, doing the money laundering. I mean, banks, especially I think HSBC was a great example where they even had custom-sized windows so that the drug cartels could fit their money bags into it. It was custom-made for money laundering. And the idea of money laundering, the why we use the word laundry, was in Al Capone's time. So this was a big-time gangster in the 1920s during the Prohibition period in the US. Basically, because he was creating all this money through the sale of alcohol, right, which was banned during that time. And he needed a way to surface that money. And the way that he surfaced that money was he had all these coin-operated laundries, and he said like, oh yeah, this laundry is making such and such money, and basically that's how money was laundered, right? Because you use a legitimate business to create revenue streams that then are reintroduced into the system, and because it's cash-based, there's no way to say like, oh yeah, this coin laundry didn't generate that much, So yeah, I mean, it's happening everywhere, and I think there's some estimates about several $1 trillion. I don't have the exact amount, but it is a very, very big problem. But at the same time, it's not being addressed. The banks that are doing the money laundering, I mean, they are banks that are facilitating this. I mean, I've seen it myself. I was a lawyer for 10 years. I see like, guys coming in with like lots of tattoos, bringing in like stacks of cash to the bank. Surely, like, where's this money coming from, right? We don't know. And I feel that the biggest facilitators of money laundering are the banks. Of course, the criminals are doing it, but it's not as if banks have been the best gatekeepers of this sort of stuff. So when I find it very hypocritical when especially all these financial institutions that facilitate most of the money laundering see privacy cryptocurrencies as a threat. Yeah, I mean, maybe a bit too much information. I do have a lot of gas problems, so that's why the fart analogy comes quite naturally. But I guess the idea is that, let's say if I'm in a lift, right, and I let out a fart, and if I'm the only one in the lift, this happens quite often, they come in and they're like, shit, it must be you because you're the only one in the lift, right? So privacy is about hiding the fact that you're the one that made that fart, right? And the other types of solution that involve mixing is, let's say if I want to let out a fart, instead of farting when I'm the only person in the lift, I maybe drag like 10 other people and then I just quietly let one out. And yeah, I mean, really, really unlucky for the guys in the lift, but who knows who was the one in the lift that farted? It could be any of these 10 or 11 people, right? And that's kind of basically how hiding in the crowd, or like, stuff like Monero, stuff like Mimblewimble, it's all about hiding in the crowd, right? And that kind of works well in a singular transaction, but what happens if I keep on farting over and over, right? Maybe people start to recognize like every time this guy's in the lift, this smell comes out, right? There is still taint, you're just hiding in the crowd. So the way zero knowledge proofs work is a different approach. Instead of dragging people into the lift to fart with, so the way we do it is we let out a fart, but we make it disappear. But we then choose when should it reappear. So let's say it could be like 1 year in the future, some random dude walks into the lift and bam, I make it smell. And they're like, who could have it been? It could have been any of the people that went into the lift before. So I would say that the privacy of zero knowledge proof is better than, let's say, things that involve cryptographic mixing. So like, as I said, Monero or CoinJoin is like dragging other people to fart with. Mimblewimble is like finding everyone who wants to fart and dragging them all together, and we all let out farts together and wondering like whose fart is whose, and that's basically how it kind of works, right? So an easy way to explain privacy through gas. No. I wish I was. I know the latest guy has a very nice hair. Maybe it makes sense for a Chinese guy to be Satoshi, given that all the miners are there. I don't do announcements of announcements, so Justin sounds really good at that. I'm not very skinny like Vitalik. I don't know. So, I mean, I don't have a very interesting origin story Ignatius Peverell. I came out from nowhere, and I don't have a technical background. I was a lawyer for 10 years and then did a VPN service, and actually how I got into crypto was kind of like weird because I wanted to download anime. and basically because my country was censoring torrents, I founded a VPN service to bypass all of that. And what happened was VPNs was a really dirty thing last time. Everyone was like, oh, why do you want encrypted communications? You must be doing something nefarious. I'm like, I just want my anime, I want my love hina or whatever it is, right? and I started that VPN business as a side business, just as a service so that I could download anime and share the server cost with a bunch of people. And suddenly there was an increased demand in this, also in privacy, and this grew to be maybe about like 8,000, 10,000 users, quite a decent number of people subscribing to my service. And what happened then was I needed new ways to accept money. And all these payment processes like to checkout, PayPal and whatnot, because you're a VPN business, they consider me as high risk. And they say like, oh, we're not going to allow you to accept, or I'm terminating your access. My credit card, so my ability to accept credit card payments was also cut off. For what? I'm not doing an illegal business. I'm just providing encryption on the internet, right? And because of that, someone was like saying, well, why don't you accept Bitcoin? And this was like in late 2012. And I was like, okay, what is this funny money? Let me take a look at it. And I found some guy in Singapore who was willing to accept Bitcoin for cash. So I was like, okay, I can accept this money, I can convert it to cash. I should not have converted it. I should not have sold it, if not I'd be really, really rich right now. But that was how I got into Bitcoin, because it was a way as an alternative modes of payment. And since then, I went into like Monero, went into Dash, all these early privacy coins. But yeah, that's kind of an interesting story of how I got here. Yeah, I mean, I think one of Zcoin's, I guess, mistakes was, when we started out, we kind of focused always too much on the technology. We're like, oh, we have no trusted setup, we have really good cryptographic primitives. Users don't give a shit about that. And we realize that now, right? It has to be something that you can use day to day and it makes it real money, right? And we have been trying to improve in that area. Of course, first of all, user experience has to be really interesting. People don't have to fiddle. It has to be as easy as using like Pay Now or Boost Payment, all this, or WeChat Pay. And I think that's a big issue. But right now, if you want to go through the Bitcoin route, like where you're trying to convince people as to the benefits of accepting this funky money, it's going to be really hard. I mean, this thing volatile, you're going to get rich one day. I think that's a really horrible narrative. Most importantly is that can you use it? So one of the things in Thailand that we're trying to do is that instead of trying to get limited adoption on a merchant-to-merchant basis, which is really not sustainable, because maybe a few months later no one spends, the employees forget, and then when you come back they're like, what's this Zcoin, right? Realistically, we need to plug into existing systems, even though they're not ideal because they involve converting to like fiat. It is a necessary way to make this, okay, is Zcoin real? If I can spend it and buy a bowl of noodles, it's real. If I can buy anything, it's real. But if I just can do it on an exchange, convert it to Bitcoin and convert it to cash, that's just like a speculative instrument. So one of the things that we've been doing in Thailand is in the PromptPay. So PromptPay is the national QR code system that's deployed in over, it has a registered user base, about 30-40 million users, and about 2 to 3 million merchants nationwide. Our founder has a regulated exchange in Thailand, and what that allows us to do is basically when someone pays, Zcoin gets immediately converted to Thai baht and Thai baht gets settled to the merchant. So the merchant doesn't even have to care that they're accepting cryptocurrencies, but the fact that I can hold a money that is kind of above the banks, I don't need a bank, and do this type of payments, it's a really good step. It's not a perfect system yet. It still uses a centralized exchange. There's still no privacy, but we have to start there. And then only then will people start to say, okay, maybe I'm going to accept Zcoin in its native form, right? And that's the start. I mean, that's how I got into Bitcoin as well. It's like, can I convert this into money? If I can convert this into like my regular currency, then it becomes real. Now another thing that we also see our the ways that we're building our platform is that yes, we are a privacy coin, but now we are also allowing other people to build on our platform, let's say through building your own token on a blockchain, except that now you have all our privacy features as well. So I mean, like, you know, right now everyone's like launching their own ERC20 token or SLP token, but you know, it's always like, I guess it's like questionable what's it's for, right? But let's say if I want to build like a USDT, like, all right, like this is going to be very controversial, but the most useful cryptocurrency is USDT, right? It's stable, and even though it's like mired in controversy, it's the most useful thing today. You know, people are actually using it, even though it may not be 100% backed, right? But so what if I can offer that type of you know, like let's say someone wants to build like a USDT on Zcoin, but have the privacy features at the same time, that would be really big. Or let's say, you know, right now our technology, I mean, we also, you know, was involved in the world's first like political election in Thailand, where the Democrat Party, it was a really, really interesting use case because they wanted to do e-voting. There were 3 candidates, and they were like, oh, let's do e-voting, it's all cool and stuff, and we get to save a lot of money. And then halfway through, they were like, shit, I don't trust you, you don't trust me, I don't trust the election commission, who's going to store all these votes? And that's where Zcoin's blockchain, they actually agreed to say, Zcoin's blockchain is agnostic, is neutral, and let's have the votes encrypted and stored on the blockchain so that I know that the votes have not been tampered with. And over 127,000 votes were cast on the blockchain, and the results were not contested. And it was a great use case of, you know, a privacy blockchain. And I do think it's a great start. Now, I do think there's no like magic pill. You know, there is increasing awareness of what privacy cryptocurrencies mean. But unfortunately, like, you know, the early privacy cryptocurrencies have often embraced things like darknet adoption. And that is something, that a narrative that we should move away from. But honestly, right now the crypto markets adoption isn't here, you know, and let's be real, you know, I've been monitoring all these coins right now. Most of the volume is market makers. And you take a look at the projects that aren't doing market making, that's the real volume. You know, like Grin, you know, like Grin, they had no market makers. They were doing like 3 Bitcoin, 10 Bitcoin, and they are like a really high profile project. You know, like everyone talks about privacy code, Monero, Zcash, and Grin. You know, Grin is like the new hot thing, and they were doing like 3 to 10 Bitcoin, and that's the real volume. That's the real demand. But you see all these other coins, I wouldn't name them, but they're all doing like 100 Bitcoin volume, 200 Bitcoin volume, and it's ridiculous. Like even Decred, they are like a top 30 coin, and they weren't doing market making. Their volumes were really dismal, like 10 Bitcoin, 20 Bitcoin, and now they have realized that, oh, to remain relevant, I need to engage market makers. They're paying them like 25,000 US dollars a month just to create a market. There's nothing wrong with what Decred is doing, but it kind of shows that how fake this whole system is. So we are under a lot of pressure. You know, exchanges are saying, why your volume so bad? You know, why don't you engage a market maker? And all these market makers, like, they are market makers. They are not making the market. They are the market. For example, I won't name them, but some market makers, they will be asking for 100 Bitcoin worth of your coin, 100 Bitcoin worth of Bitcoin, and then you have to pay them the fee again. That's the entire market. You can move it any way you want, right? So I would question to say that, you know, don't just take a look at the volumes, because that can be easily faked, and that can, not just on the exchange level, but also on the market making level. And really, we should not be talking about what's going to make me rich. Let's build stuff that really makes sense, you know. We have not reached that period yet where people think privacy cryptocurrencies are like really important. But I do think in the next few years, we'll really see that when governments start really taking control of money.